Hello, everybody, and welcome to Etech Muddy Boots, where we don't just talk about it, we stomp right through it. I'm your host, Melissa, and this is the show that gets down and dirty with everyday leaders who are making real change happen. We're not afraid to get our boots muddy because that's where the real stories are. So lace up, slip them on, step out, and join us as we trudge through the trenches of trust building and action taking, real action taking. If you are tired of all the talk and no walk, you're in the right spot. So let's get your boots ready. Let's lace up. Let's get muddy. Welcome to Melissa's Muddy Boots, where real leaders don't mind getting their hands dirty. I'm your host, Melissa. And if you're looking for that corner office with a view, well, if you're looking for that theory, you're just in the wrong place. This episode, we believe the best leaders have mud on their boots and action behind their talk. Every episode, we dive deep with the leaders who aren't afraid to wade the messy parts of leadership. You know, the messy parts, the tough decisions, the failed attempts, and the hard-won victories. Because let's face it, if your boots are clean, you're probably not in the trenches where the real work's happening. Lace it up, Veronica. Lace it up. Step it in. Join us for raw, practical leadership insights that you can put to work today. No polished theories, no empty promises, just real help from guess who? Real leaders. You know what? You can't trust a cowboy with clean boots. You can't trust a leader with clean, with their boots clean. So welcome to Melissa's Muddy Boots podcast. Today's episode, here's where we kick in. So all that'll be pre-recorded. They'll have pictures of mud and boots and leaders and all of you and all that. That's what I envision, like stomping through the mud. Namisha, I promised to get her pictures of me wearing my boots with mud all over them. So that's what is going to be on the intro of it. Today's episode, where I'm so excited to have real leaders with real muddy boots, de-escalating conflicts. How do you keep your cool and your crew? That's today's topic on Melissa's Muddy Boots. So I have a lineup of leaders today. Chris Bazile, our very own Chris Bazile, all the way from San Antonio, Texas, via Las Vegas, via New York, and Dr. Chimney, Dr. Veronica Chimney, which will make Chris and Michael behave today. That's her job. And then our very own Michael Amazon, where he doesn't actually wear boots, but if he did, they'd be very dirty. They would be very dirty. I know that because I watch him in the trenches every single day. So welcome to our panel today on such a raw topic. I don't know if this topic is out there in the universe, de-escalating conflicts, but how to keep your cool and your crew. So let's get going. You guys ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. So first of all, I have a question for the panel. Conflict. Is it bad or good? Oh. Who wants to take that one?
I think it could be both. Yeah. I mean, I'll start it off. I think you can have good conflict. Obviously, there's conflict that could cause tensions in the workplace, but it's okay to feel comfortable being uncomfortable. And there's an appropriate amount of conflict, I think, at work that drives us to perform. So I would say absolutely yes, you could have a good balance of both.
All right. I agree to that. Anybody want to agree or disagree?
I agree 100%. Okay.
All right, good. I can see by Michael's smile, he agrees in conflict. So I want to be very clear for the leaders that are helping. If you're on this podcasters, this is where you should be taking notes. First thing we want to be very clear is that we're not trying to avoid conflict here. That's not how you get muddy boots. There is healthy conflict and there is unhealthy conflict. So we wanted to get that lined out today. But now when you face conflict, how do you keep your cool, right? That's a big thing. And I know that you've seen leaders that do it really well, and you've seen leaders that don't do it really well. Michael and I were just talking about this several weeks ago about, leaders really need help in this area. We've all made mistakes in this area, so we're here to help you in this area. So let's start with body language. So Dr. Chimney, what do you think are some early signs that tell you that escalation may be on the horizon when we talk about body language? What should leaders look for?
They should look for eye contact and facial stance. Because a lot of times when there's tension, you can see it in the face. The fold arms, now it's not necessarily 100% like this at all times, but a lot of times when people are crossing their arms and they're leaning back and, they have that little smirk on their face, they're not really happy with the flow of the conversation. So you want to be sure that it's very, very well balanced, and looking at the eyes. Eye contact is critical, and looking at the stance of the face, because that tension that you can see here and here will actually, describe the type of conversation you're going to have with an individual.
Yeah. I like that closed off. I had to catch, and that helps us when we're like, watch yourself. Like if you're closing your arms in meetings and those types of things. Anything else, Michael, that you see like from a nonverbal perspective that kind of lets you know that you're about to get into a potential conflict situation?
No, I think what Veronica said is pretty much what I think you should be looking for, especially the eye contact, because I've been in situations where we'll start and they're looking at everywhere but at the person having that conversation. The stance, the arms, it really depends, because I have some people that kind of just, this is how they naturally in any conversation, so that really depends. But I definitely think the tension on the face, the eye contact, and probably just the overall general look on their face too, if they're scowling, or you can tell when they're if they're a little upset, maybe their face is a little bit red. You can, I think those are pretty good tells how that's going to go.
Okay, so let's just say we see that. We see the eyes going up. We can tell through body language we've got a situation here, right? These are real things that really happen. So what should a leader do first to stay calm and collected? Because we're trying to keep her cool and keep our crew, right? So what are some tips and advice that works, that you've seen work for you or other leaders? Chris, let's start with you. What are some things that leaders need to do to stay cool first?
Well, I think they have to pay attention to their own body language. What is it that they're projecting out? Because as a leader, your people are going to naturally and instinctively look to you to see how you're reacting to the situation. So that would be the first thing. I think you have to choose your words wisely, and make sure that you respond in kind of a soft tone, while practice of effective listening as well, and saying I statements or we statements to try to diffuse any sort of situation, specifically depending how tense the situation may be.
Ooh, that's good. That I and we, that's practical, because you were late. You didn't show up. You said you would do this, versus this is how I understood what you said. Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
Because then you're just adding fuel to the fire at that point if you're using those.
Okay, that's a good way for a leader to stay cool. Michael, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, and I've had conversations with my leaders about this, but that almost, I mean, it's not really a good thing to say, but seeing that almost puts me in a different mindset when I can tell they're very agitated, because that honestly, it focuses me a little bit more. And I know that I have to, again, like what Chris said, like my body language and my projection when I'm talking has to be different. And I know I've had conversations with leaders where they're like, even if before we start talking with them, they'll say, hey, this is going to be happening, and they're really upset, and I think when I have those conversations, they'll, regardless of how I feel about it, it's I have to take myself out of that situation and kind of relax myself, and then just make sure that, Chris said the eyes and the we's, but my mindset is, again, with my body language and my tone, is to try to automatically right away start trying to soften everything, and making sure that I'm not talking at them, but we're talking together. We're here to try to solve this and resolve this, and we're going to work on this together. And that hopefully the tone, I think if you come in there with a good tone and good body language, that helps soften a little bit of how that person's, and I've seen it happen where they, they'll get, and then as soon as I come in with, the softness, and, it starts to settle them in a little bit. It doesn't resolve it right away, but they know that's going to be, let's say it's going to be a civil conversation and it's not going to be a shouting conversation. We're not just going to be at each other's throats. That it's, as long as I'm staying cool, I think that keeps everyone in that whole circle staying the same way.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Dr. Chimney, you've seen both sides of this. Like, as an executive in human resources, and you've worked in the trenches. Both Michael and Chris, they lead large organizations, part of Etech. But for you, you've seen where leaders messed up in this area, where they could have de-escalated the situation with their own body language and tone, and then you see them do really well. So what advice would you give for the leaders to first do when they recognize someone's body language where we're about to get into a conflict situation?
That's a good question, Melissa. I'm going to take a step backwards because I think that it's important for leaders to know that we are 100% in control on being intentional on setting the stage to deal with conflict. And that means we need to think about what we're going to talk about. We need to think about how we're going to seat the individuals that we're going to speak with. Where are we going to sit? What room are we going to go in? And also, I love what Michael and Chris have said, thinking about the tone. All those things need to be already outlined. And it is absolutely okay to take a deep breath and just breathe to be sure that you are relaxed. I mean, we should never go into conflict all angry and tense, because it's going to, that energy is contagious. And so we are in the sales industry as well. And so quite often people are mirroring the other person's behavior. And so if we go into a meeting kind of, with an attitude or with anxiety on our shoulders, the individual will feel that. Energy is strong and it's real. So being intentionally prepared before you go into that session is critical. I think that would be step number one. But step number two would be to be sure that you are talking to yourself as a leader. Not crazy talk, but talking to yourself, talking yourself through a situation on listening to how you sound. Chris or Michael said it's important to reevaluate on how we're speaking and speak softer. Sometimes we need to be sure that we're thinking about just creating a calm event so that you can be authentic on the communication and listen. All of those things are very important.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is why I said in our intro that if you're looking for corner office theories, this is not your podcast. These are actual leaders that probably dealt with that this morning. They've dealt with it their entire career. So these are leaders' practical world application. I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. On Mother's Day, about 20 years ago, I listened to it was actually a sermon, and the gentleman, the pastor, said to me on Mother's Day, he said, mothers set the tone for their house. They create the temperature for their home. And I was sitting there like, what is he talking about? And he said, a mother can be a sunshiny day. A mother can be a rainstorm, a tornado, a tsunami, right? So when your family comes in, whatever mood the mother at that moment, what he was saying to me as a mother is that you can kind of set the tone for how people deal with things, right? So your kids could be coming home from school having a terrible day, and if you're sunshiny, you can help them get through their storm. But if your kids come home and you are a tornado and they're having a rainy day, then an explosion will happen, right? Mm-hmm. So the same thing, I just think about how that was applying to me personally. That might not apply to everyone personally, but you have to take that as a leader and say, that's exactly what Chris and Dr. Chimney and Michael are saying. You can create a thunderstorm as a leader in a conflict situation, or you can bring some calmness, the rain after a storm, into a situation. So you create the weather, if you will. If you've downloaded WeatherBug, you need to check yourself first before you go in the conversation and say, what kind of storm, where am I in this situation? Okay.
Melissa, yes. May I add one more thing, though? Yes. Because I said that it is important for the leader to realize that they are 100% in control on setting the atmosphere, and that is true. But realistically, on occasion, a leader can set the atmosphere, and the response from the employee that they're speaking to is not reciprocated. I mean, maybe they're unhinged, or maybe they're just not focused. And so the outcome is not what is expected, but it is still the response of the leader that can be
Yeah.
owned. That's still intentional. So I just wanted to be sure that everyone understands. We're not saying that everyone's going to say, oh, this is great feedback, and they're going to join on board with clapping hands, because that is not always the case.
And that's where leaders, I think it trips them up. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I was gonna say I agree, because I was gonna say, you know, sometimes that approach, and as leaders, you know, sometimes it I don't want everyone to think that if you come into that kind of conversation and like automatically everything's just rainbows and sunshines. Sometimes it might take a little time, and as a leader, you have to be patient enough to go through that, because I've been in conversations where it might have taken 30, 40 minutes to finally get everyone calm. But it's, again, you being calm during that whole entire time that's going to key to it. Or like Veronica said, it might not. Like they can go completely, and I'm sure we've all been in those where it's gone completely not the way you thought, but it's still very key for the leader to stay in control of that, because you also don't want to make it worse, or, you know, just get it really blown out of proportion by just getting frustrated, and then your tone starts going up, and then it just gets out of control, and then all HR gets involved, and it's a whole big mess. So it's key to be. You have to be patient, and it's tough I know it's tough for some leaders to stay that way, because they feel like, well, if I'm meeting you halfway, you should automatically, but that's not always the case. It's definitely not always the case.
Melissa, we've talked plenty about having courageous conversations, and I think specifically for newer leaders, you have to look if there's patterns of avoidance when it comes to addressing the conflict, even to engage in the first part. And as leaders, we have to be not only looking to help resolve conflict, but we also have to look and be mindful of, do we have some people who are avoiding it to address it? And what steps and tips can we give them? So this is all part of it, this package. And again, it's not going to be rainbows and sunshine every time. And you have to continue to add to your tool belt with each and every experience you go through. So,
God, this is really good. I'm glad Michael actually picked this topic, because this is a real live topic that we face every day. Okay. So, you know, this is kind of closing us out with this question is, what technique would you give a leader to keep their cool? Like, what do they need to do if they're in this situation, whether they've done all the prep work, they get in a situation and it's escalated, right? What technique will you give a leader at that moment, in the heat of the moment? What can they do to keep their cool and keep their crew? Dr. Chimney, I'm going with you, because you're smiling. You're like, I've got a technique.
Well, I will. This is so simple, and it seems ridiculous because it's so simple, but just breathing. Yeah. Like really breathing, that really makes a big difference, because a lot of times when you're angry, you could research this on your own. Psychologists have said that when we're angry, we tend to hold our breath. Yeah. We'll hold our breath, like we're, stirring up some energy so that we can just let it come out. But just breathing and continuing to tell yourself to remain calm, and ensuring that your voice doesn't elevate, so it seems as though you're yelling. So just remain in control. I think that is critical. That is so critical. And also be aware of how you're sitting, so that it's not intimidating. So you want to set the atmosphere so that the room is very relaxed. But then the last thing I would say is to remember your why on why you're having the conversation. It is to make someone better. It's to make someone better. So it could be, I'm giving them feedback to get better, or I'm calling out an area of opportunity on something that they may have done wrong. But the reason that you're giving them that feedback is, what's the reason? It's because you want them to be better. And we hold people accountable because we want them to improve. And so when we can remember the why, it makes delivering the information so much easier. And I think the recipient needs to understand the why. So I'm giving you this feedback because, let them know it's because you care about them and you see potential and you want them to grow. And they may not receive it, but you're going to be authentic and give that feedback to them.
Ooh, I love that. Is there a breathing technique before Chris goes? Like, because I know that I was taught like 10, hold 10, but do you have like a certain breathing technique?
I do. It's like a 10-second, when you're just like breathing slowly. Here's a challenge though. If you tried it right now, listen, listeners, try to breathe on your own. it will mess you up if you focus too much on it, because we breathe just by nature. It's just natural. And so when you're focused too hard on it, you can't, the rhythm is off. And so just remain calm and don't think too much about breathing, but be sure to take that breath in, bring that oxygen in, and then release it and release it. And you can tell the tension in your shoulders. This seems so simple, but these are real key things. The tension is in our shoulder, leaning forward, leaning backward, all of those things. You can feel the tension. So just get some oxygen through your body.
All right. That's a good tip. I got 3 tips there. The breathing, the intimidating, the way the room might be set up. If you can't just stand up and talk at someone, those types of things. And then the reason why we're having the meeting. Okay, Chris, you had something to say to that, or you're helpful.
Just add on to what Veronica was saying. Feedback is a gift, and you taking the time to explain that to them. What Veronica was talking about, the why, it is a gift. And for people who know me, this is for leaders on all levels. When I get passionate about something, my voice goes 1,000 times higher, 10 octaves higher. And I'm Italian, so I feel like I'm naturally cursed because we talk loud. So you have to be mindful of the areas that you can always continue to improve in as well. And I think, Melissa, even in conversations that we've had, it's that self-awareness. It's being aware of the emotional conditions that are going on in the environment that you're in, being able to read the room, understanding the tension, understanding the body language, and just focus on solutions. Focus on listening and focus on solutions.
Wonderful. Okay, Michael. I know you're in these rooms. You've watched your leaders go. This is real. This is what we have this podcast for, because you said, Melissa, I've watched my leaders turn a situation. It didn't have to go that far, right? And I've seen some of them do it really well, and I've seen some of them do it really poorly. So what do you have for us? What can we do to get better at this?
So I agree with everyone on the why and trying to steer that conversation back to the why. I think that's super important. 2 things that I like to do is, one, I will when I go to these, or when I'm in these meetings, I take notes. And the reason I do that is it helps me slow the conversation down, because if it gets really intense, I'll say, sorry, 1 second, I'm taking a note here. But I'll also, as I'm doing that intentionally to slow everything down, to keep the conversation under control. But also, if I start feeling like I'm starting to get a little irritated, or because it's natural, it's like sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this is just but I'll start doing that to slow myself down, and then also take notes on, like, I'll jot down just kind of how the pace is going, of, okay, it's de-escalating, or no, they're starting to get irritated, and it kind of, it's almost a reminder to myself, like, hey, this conversation's it's not quite where it needs to be yet. It hasn't been de-escalated yet. So I definitely like to take notes. It helps me keep the conversation at pace, because I can pause and say, just one second, sorry, I'm just taking notes. Also, it makes them too, and it also hopefully makes them feel valued, that I'm sitting at I just want to make sure I get everything down that you're saying, or I just want to make sure I understand the situation. Because then sometimes I'll go back and refer back to what they said. Hey, you said earlier in the conversation that, the reason why you feel this way is X, Y, and Z. Is that correct? But again, I feel like doing that helps kind of it helps me stay in control of the situation, and gives me an opportunity to slow things down. And then also I can refer back to things said in that conversation, because sometimes too, when things get heated and there's a lot going on, I want to make sure I'm jotting everything down so I can go back to the why. Can you explain? Hey, I just looked at my notes here. Can you why did you say this again? And why do you feel this way? So the note thing is something that I definitely, and sometimes I'm not even writing anything. Sometimes, again, it's all about just trying to control the situation and making sure that I'm keeping things on path. And I think that definitely helps me, in those situations, and gives me something to refer back to, and then also just to slow things down. And then referring back to the why, I think is important, in those conversations, to keep everyone back on track. Because sometimes, and I'm sure we've been in those conversations where you feel like you have the why, but it goes completely in a different direction, and it starts being, no, we got to pause that. Let's go back to, this is the reason why that is. And then kind of the one little other thing that I might do, and it depends, is hopefully, and I know if it's an agent, it's harder because I know we don't know all the agents like uber well, but I think from when you're dealing with leaders, hopefully everyone knows them enough that you can tie things back that are more relatable to them, or try to ice break things with them. There was one situation I had with the leader where he was pretty upset about just a situation that he didn't feel like there was anything wrong with what he said, but it upset other people around him. And I kind of steered that conversation to, well, do you understand why, this would be upset if you were this person, or you had, if your family felt this way, would it, and it kind of brought him back to, yeah, I get what you're saying. So understanding too, and having, those getting to know yous with your leaders. And I know, again, at an agent level, I know it's hard because you can't know everybody, but at an agent or a leader level, knowing your leaders too can really help in those situations, because you can really steer some of those, because you understand, who they are, what are their goals, or what are they trying to accomplish, and you can kind of tie some of that back into that conversation to kind of cool them down a little bit.
Michael has special powers. He's reading my mind, because I was thinking,
I know.
I was thinking that when we have a solid foundation of a relationship with the people that are on our teams, it makes it easier to be transparent in giving feedback and having those difficult conversations. And that is critical. It is also equally important to know that, as leaders of leaders, quite often we are speaking to people that may not report directly to us. So this message would be specifically for those that are giving feedback to the members of their teams. When you have a relationship, getting to know you, Michael said, which is one of our favorite models, but when we have a relationship and we're getting to know the people on our teams, it makes it easier to deliver the information. But when they know us, it makes it easier for them to receive, because they know our heart. And I'm going to use that. We can use that. And even in a professional stance, they know our heart. They know our intentions behind the feedback that's being delivered.
Trust in this entire process is one of those foundational bedrocks. You have, as a leader, you have to make many deposits into your people for them to feel and know that trust and know that you truly care. So
see why you guys are on this podcast. This is real help for real people. I think this is a good way to tie it up, is all of you are talking about our motive, the motive of why you have someone in a conversation to begin with, right? And when they know your motive, it's like we can get to a resolution when they know your motive is really to get to a resolution and to not do them harm, but to do them good, right? So I think that's really important. All right. Well, thank you for tackling such a raw topic today. I see every one of you with boots that are muddy. I see every one of you with boots that are muddy. So any leader can pull up this podcast, and I feel like they can get practical things that will help them today when they're dealing with conflict. We go all the way from, is it important? Should we even have it? Is conflict good or bad? To, what to look for. And then really some great resources on how to de-escalate, and then really how to have relationships from a foundation part to even before you get yourself in that situation. And a lot of these conflict situations are because we didn't build that trust, like Chris was saying, and have that foundation. So we can definitely start there. And that's really a proactive approach that will help you, because it's not if we're going to have conflict, it's when we're going to have conflict. We have it in our families with people that we love dearly. We've chosen to be in a relationship with them. And so we're going to have conflict personally, and we're going to have conflict professionally. I'm just encouraging everyone that's listening today. Everything that Dr. Chimney and Chris and Michael have said is how we respond to it, not how we react to it. So thank you for getting your boots muddy with us today. Until next time, we'll see you on Melissa's Muddy Boots.